If you dropped a human down to 6,000 meters, the pressure would be so extreme it would crush air spaces instantly. Your lungs, your sinuses, anything with gas. And here's the true shocking part. At that same depth, inside ocean trenches, there are animals living normal lives. Not barely surviving. Feeding, reproducing, competing. In saltwater at 6,000 meters, the pressure is about 596 atmospheres, nearly 600 times what you feel at sea level. So how is there life where pressure should win? And why did trench discoveries force biologists to rewrite what habitable even means? We're going down to the edge of the hadal world, around 6,000 meters, where the abyss turns into trenches and the seafloor becomes a long, narrow scar in Earth's crust. And before we go any deeper, lock in one fact that will keep the whole episode grounded. Pressure increases by about 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of depth. That sounds like a nice clean number until you realize what it means at trench depths. 1,000 meters, tilde 100 atmospheres. 4,000 meters, tilde 400 atmospheres. 6,000 meters, tilde 600 atmospheres. 11,000 meters, the deepest trenches, over 1,000 atmospheres. That is not pressure like a heavy weight. That's pressure like physics trying to erase your structure, and yet life is there. Imagine the descent. At the surface, the ocean is loud with light. Even if you don't see fish, you feel like the environment makes sense. Sky above, waves, sun. Then you drop. A few hundred meters down, color drains away. Reds vanish first, then oranges. You enter a world of silhouettes. Go deeper and sunlight becomes a rumor, then disappears completely. Not dim. Gone. Now you're in the deep ocean's permanent night, and the only light that exists is what living things flash into existence, or what we bring down as artificial beams. At 6,000 meters, it's not just dark. It's cold. It's quiet. It's crushing. And here's the psychological trick. Your brain keeps insisting that a place like this should be sterile, like a vacuum, like the inside of a sealed pressure vessel. But the trenches aren't sterile. They're alive. So what exactly is 6,000 meters in ocean terms? That depth is important because it's commonly used as the boundary where the ocean transitions into the hadal zone, the trench world. Woods Hole explains the hadal zone as the region from roughly 6,000 to 11,000 meters, and that it exists only in trenches. This matters because the deep sea isn't one continuous flat environment. Trenches are special. They're long, narrow, steep-walled basins. They're often associated with subduction zones, places where one tectonic plate slides beneath another. They collect sediment and organic material like a giant gutter at the bottom of the planet. They create isolated habitats, meaning trench life can evolve in weird, unique directions. So when people say the deepest ocean, they're often picturing a single hole. But trenches are more like a scattered network of deep scars, each one its own extreme ecosystem. And historically, scientists didn't even treat them as their own world until mid-20th century expedition results showed life shifts around the 6,000 meter range, helping define hadal as distinct from abyssal depths. Now let's confront the central question. Why shouldn't life be able to exist there? Because pressure doesn't just squeeze you. Pressure attacks biology at the molecular level. Here's what high hydrostatic pressure can do. It can disrupt how proteins fold and function. It can change the behavior of enzymes, slowing or breaking the chemistry of life. It can alter membrane structure, making cell membranes too rigid or too leaky. It can affect reactions involving gases and dissolved molecules, and it can turn small weaknesses into catastrophic failures. So trench animals aren't just tough. They're running a completely different version of normal. Biologists call organisms that prefer high-pressure piezo-philes or barophiles. They don't merely tolerate pressure. Their biology works best under it. And that single idea, organisms that prefer pressure, was one of the mindset shifts that trench exploration forced onto biology. Now here's the part that really changed things. For a long time, deep-sea life was imagined as mostly dependent on stuff falling down from above, marine snow and carcasses. That's still true as a major energy source, but trenches add a twist. They can act like collection points. Particles, organic debris, and even bigger events, like sediment slumps, can funnel material into trench bottoms. That means certain trench locations can be surprisingly food-rich compared to the surrounding abyssal plains. So instead of a perfectly uniform deep desert, the trench can become an irregular buffet. Not constant, not comfortable, but enough to support real ecosystems. Scavengers, predators, microbes, and everything in between. This is why baited cameras and landers can show something shocking. You drop bait to the trench floor, and life shows up, not after days, sometimes after minutes. Let's talk about the first animals most people associate with trench footage, amphipods. They look like shrimp-like scavengers, but in trenches, they can become the main characters. Because amphipods are among the dominant scavenging animals below 6,000 meters in many trench systems. One famous name you'll see in Hadal research is Hyrndalea gigas, a giant trench amphipod known from the deepest parts of the Northwest Pacific trenches. Why amphipods? Because trenches reward scavengers. In a world where meals can be rare but huge, like a dead fish, a sinking squid, or a chunk of organic fall, being able to find food fast and tear it apart is a winning strategy. So amphipods become the street cleaners of the Hadal world. If you watch trench lander footage, the pattern can feel unreal. Bait arrives, then the first scouts, then swarms, then a living carpet of bodies moving in the dark, and all of it happening under pressures that would obliterate most human technology without specialized housings. But amphipods are only the beginning, because trench life didn't just reveal hardy scavengers, it revealed something even more controversial: fish. For decades, people assumed there would be a hard limit where vertebrate fish just couldn't function because their proteins and cellular chemistry would fail. And there is a limit, but it turned out fish can go deeper than many people expected. In April 2023, the Natural History Museum reported Japanese and Australian researchers filming a snailfish at 8,336 meters, the deepest fish filmed at that time, close to the estimated depth limit for fish. Let that number sit for a second. 8,336 meters is not deep. That's the surface is another planet deep. And yet the fish is there, moving, investigating, behaving like a real animal, not a myth. That kind of discovery didn't just add a cool fact. It forced biologists to ask a brutal question. If a vertebrate can live there, what else can? Now, why snailfish? Snailfish are often soft-bodied, gelatinous-looking compared to fast-surface fish. That softness is not weakness. It can be an advantage in pressure because they don't rely on big gas spaces that collapse. Deep snailfish lineages also show biochemical patterns tied to pressure adaptation. One of the best-known mechanisms discussed in deep fish biology is the use of molecules called osmolytes, compounds that help stabilize proteins under pressure. A famous example is TMAO, trimethylamine N-oxide, often discussed as increasing with depth in some fish to help proteins keep working. Here's the important part for a video script. Don't overhype it like a magical shield. Think of it like this: pressure wants to deform the tiny machines inside cells. Life fights back by adjusting chemistry, reinforcing proteins, tuning membranes, changing enzyme structures, so the cell machinery still runs. In the trenches, evolution doesn't give you one superpower. It gives you a full toolkit. So what does that toolkit look like across trench life? Here are some of the biggest pressure hacks we see again and again in Hadal biology. 1. Membrane tuning. Cell membranes are made of lipids, fats that behave differently under pressure and cold. Many deep organisms increase the proportion of unsaturated fatty acids to keep membranes from becoming too stiff. Translation: they keep their cell skin flexible in a world that wants to freeze and crush it. 2. Protein stabilization. High pressure can disrupt protein folding and enzyme activity. Many deep organisms evolve proteins that maintain function under pressure, and they may use osmolytes to protect protein structure. 3. No big gas spaces. Many trench organisms avoid large gas-filled cavities. Gas compresses dramatically with pressure. That's one reason a human body is such a disaster design for deep ocean depths. 4. Slow life, efficient life. Metabolism in the deep can be slower, not because the animals are lazy, but because energy is limited and temperatures are low. But here's the twist that surprises people. Trench animals aren't uniformly slow or scarce. When food appears, trench ecosystems can become suddenly crowded. It's not a quiet desert. It's a desert with flash mobs. Now let's talk about the moment trench life changed biology historically, because it wasn't a single fish record. It was the realization that life occupies environments we assumed were beyond the boundary of normal biology. The Hadal Zone is often described as among the least explored and most extreme marine ecosystems, defined by darkness, cold, nutrient limitations, and very high pressures. And yet the Hadal is not empty. WHOI describes trenches reaching 2 meters and highlights how these zones exist only in trenches, meaning they're rare in area but huge in depth range. That combination, rare but extreme, made trench discoveries psychologically powerful. We had explored coastlines, shelves, reefs. We assumed we understood the range of normal ocean life. And then trenches reminded us we had barely touched Earth's real extremes. But how do we know what's down there? We don't send scuba divers to 6,000 meters. We send machines. And this is where trench biology also changed engineering. NOAA notes that at 6,000 meters the pressure is around 596 atmospheres, and most electronics need to operate at 1 atmosphere, meaning deep-sea equipment must be protected inside housings that can withstand crushing pressure. So trench exploration is a story of pressure spheres, titanium housings, syntactic foam, acoustic releases, cameras built to survive darkness and shock, landers that free fall and then sit on the bottom like silent observers. This is how trench life was revealed, not by humans swimming into the underworld, but by robots learning how to survive there long enough to look. Now picture a trench lander mission. A frame drops through black water for hours. It carries a camera, a light, a bait canister, sensors, sometimes traps or sampling containers. It reaches the seafloor and sits. At first, nothing, just silt and darkness. Then a faint movement, a small scavenger. Then two, then the swarm. And if you've never seen this footage, it looks like something out of fiction because the animals don't behave like rare deep monsters. They behave like a functioning ecosystem responding to opportunity. That's a big deal, because it means trench systems have traffic, competition, feeding hierarchies, predator-prey dynamics, not a lonely horror scene, a living world. Now let's zoom in on what life looks like at the trench floor. The Hadal environment often includes extremely fine sediments, steep walls that can slump, zones where organic matter can accumulate, cold temperatures, total darkness, enormous pressure. That sediment matters, because sediment isn't just mud, it's habitat, it's food storage, it's microbial real estate. Microbes in trenches can process organic matter, and microbial communities may be uniquely tuned to high pressure and trench chemistry. And here's the deeper implication. When trench biology expanded, it didn't just expand animal biology. It expanded microbial ecology and biogeochemistry, because microbes run the baseline chemistry of Earth. If microbes thrive under high pressure, then the boundaries of habitability shift. Not anything is possible, but our assumptions were too narrow. Let's return to the title's emotional core, life where pressure should win. Pressure should win if life were fragile. But life isn't fragile in the way we intuitively think. Life is fragile in some ways: temperature, oxygen, toxins. But life is also astonishingly adaptable if evolution has time and if there's energy. And trenches provide both: long evolutionary time, enough energy arriving from above, especially through episodic events. So trench ecosystems become proof of a principle. Habitability is not about comfort. It's about workable chemistry and energy flow. That principle is why trench biology echoes into other sciences, like astrobiology, because it changes how we define possible. Again, not speculation, just a lesson from Earth. Now, let's talk about what changed in biology specifically. Before the modern era of deep exploration, biology textbooks were heavily surface biased. Life depends on sunlight, mostly true at the surface. Extreme pressure is hostile, true but not empty. Deep sea is sparse, often true but not universal. And the deepest places are nearly lifeless, not true. Trench discoveries forced several rewrites. Pressure is not an absolute barrier. It's a selective force. It doesn't erase life, it shapes it. The deep ocean has structured ecosystems, not just scattered survivors. The Hadal is patchy but real, communities exist, and some are abundant when food appears. Vertebrates can approach trench depths near 8,000 plus meters. The 8,336-meter snailfish footage is a prime example of how deep fish can go. Trench regions can host high endemism and unique evolutionary paths. Because trenches are isolated like islands, species can diverge and become specialized. And here's the key emotional outcome. Trenches turned deep sea from a vague idea into a set of real biological rules. Now let's be honest about something people confuse. 6,000 meters isn't the deepest. It's the gateway. It's the line where Hadal begins in the common definition, to 11,000 meters. So why make the episode 6,000 m ocean trench rather than 11,000 m? Because 6,000 is where the story starts to become Hadal. It's the point where pressure is already around 600 atmospheres, where trenches begin to show distinct ecological patterns, and where the environment becomes so extreme that every living thing there is an argument against our assumptions. Also, it's a number that anchors the viewer's imagination. At 6,000 meters, the darkness is complete, the pressure is near 600 atm, and yet life shows up anyway. That contrast is the entire hook. Now let's take a quick detour into the "how do we film it" reality, because this is where viewers often underestimate what's involved. At 6,000 meters, equipment has to survive pressure that can crush typical housings, long deployments, cold temperatures, corrosion, impact with the seafloor, sediment clouds that can blind cameras. That's why trench footage feels rare. Every minute of it costs engineering effort. So when you see clear trench video, you're not just seeing animals. You're seeing a victory over physics. That matters because it explains why trench life remained hidden for so long, not because it was rare, but because it was hard to observe. Now, what does trench life actually look like, visually? A lot of Hadal animals don't look like the classic monster. They look like pale, soft-bodied, compact, often without bright colors, sometimes with reduced or specialized sensory features. Because in the Hadal, bright colors don't matter. There's no sunlight to show them off. What matters is chemical sensing, vibration detection, finding food efficiently, surviving pressure, reproducing in a huge, sparse world. So trench evolution tends to produce animals that look like function-first designs. That's why the scariest part of trench life isn't teeth. It's normalcy. It's seeing an animal behave normally in a place that feels impossible. Let's return to amphipods for a moment, because they're often the easiest trench story to visualize. Research and reviews commonly describe amphipods as dominant scavengers in hadal trenches below 6,000 meters.
meter anchor.
That dominance matters because scavengers reveal something about the trench ecosystem. They reveal that food arrives often enough, at least in pulses, to support active scavenging. And that means the hadal isn't simply a graveyard, it's a processing zone, a recycling zone, a place where falling energy gets converted into living tissue. Even if that conversion is slow and rare compared to surface ecosystems. Now, the deepest fish footage brings us to one of the most important trench questions. Is there a hard limit for complex life? For fish, evidence suggests there is a depth range where pressure and physiology become too demanding, often discussed around the 8,008, 500-meter neighborhood for many teleost fish, though exact limits depend on biology and the species involved. And the 8,336-meter filmed snailfish is right near that limit, which is why researchers describe it as close to the depth limit for fish. But fish limit is not life limit, because many invertebrates and microbes can go deeper. So trenches teach a layered lesson. Vertebrates might have a ceiling. Invertebrates might push deeper. Microbes push deepest. Life doesn't end in one clean line. It fades through different groups with different constraints. That layered habitability is exactly what changed biological thinking, because it replaced deep sea is too extreme with different life forms hit different limits. Now here's another key trench discovery theme: isolation. Each trench can be like an island separated by ridges and abyssal plains. That means populations can become genetically distinct, evolving trench-specific adaptations. So trench biology also contributed to biogeography, the study of how species distributions are shaped. Because trenches are not just deep, they're separated. So evolution gets to run isolated experiments. And isolation is where nature gets creative. If you could hover in a submersible at 6,000 meters, safely inside a pressure sphere, here's what you'd experience. Your lights turn on. The seafloor appears as a flat plane of sediment with scattered rocks, almost like a lunar surface. But it's not empty. A small movement on the edge of the beam, then another. As your presence stirs the water, a faint cloud of silt rises like smoke, except it's not smoke, it's sediment drifting in slow motion. Then, if bait is present, you start to see animals committing to the scene. They don't sprint in like reef fish. They move with cold efficiency. They arrive, test, feed, compete. And in that moment, you realize the trench isn't just a deep hole. It's a functioning habitat, one that existed for millions of years before humans had the technology to peak. So why does the title say, "This changed biology"? Because trench life didn't just add new species to a list. It changed the boundaries of three big ideas. 1. The boundary of physiological possibility. If animals can function under 600 plus atmospheres, then cellular systems can be tuned far beyond what surface biology suggests. 2. The boundary of ecological complexity. Even in extreme pressure and darkness, ecosystems exist with scavengers, predators, microbial processing, and community structure. 3. The boundary of our ignorance. Trenches are among the least explored environments. Hadal habitats occupy a tiny area of seafloor compared to the whole ocean, but represent a huge portion of the ocean's depth range, meaning a lot of Earth's vertical habitat is still hard to sample. The deep ocean isn't just unknown because it's far. It's unknown because it's hostile to observation. And every trench expedition updates what we think Earth even includes. Now let's bring this to a close with the cleanest possible takeaway. At 6,000 meters, the ocean enters the hadal world. Pressure is near 600 atmospheres, and NOAA notes 596 atm at 6,000 meters. That pressure should destroy the kinds of bodies we're used to, but it didn't destroy life. Instead, it selected for life that treats pressure as normal. Amphipods dominate many hadal scavenging scenes. Snailfish have been filmed down to 8,336 meters, showing vertebrates can approach trench depths near the edge of what fish can handle. And the hadal zone, roughly 6,000 to 11,000 meters, is a real biome, not a myth. So the trenches didn't just give us scary footage. They gave us a new definition of possible. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like and subscribe because we're building a full Deep Ocean series where every impossible thing is real and explained. And next time we can go even darker in a different way. Not pressure, but deception. How animals in the abyss use light itself as a weapon, including lures, counter-illumination, and the deep scattering layer that moves like a living ceiling. But for now, remember this. In the trenches, the scariest thing isn't that monsters live there. It's that life looks pressure in the face and keeps going anyway.